Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Midlands Forum for Growth panel session on cutting edge technology leading the way. So I'm going to start with some introductions to our panel, but just to say we had a preparation session and we had a lot to say. So unless we peaked early, it should be a good session. So starting to introduce our panelists. Lesley Holt is Head of Communications and Stakeholder Engagement at West Midlands 5G, where she leads stakeholder engagement and communications. We have Professor Ming, who is Associate Dean for Research at the School of Architecture, Design and Built Environment at Nottingham Trent University. He has 30 years of research experience in the use of information technology and performance improvement in construction, and is author of a book, Understanding IT in Construction. We have Rob Valentine, Director of Bruntwood Works, who is also a trustee of Grand Union, which is an arts organisation based in Digbeth, and he also recently joined the board of the West Midlands Growth Company. And then finally, Martin Yardley is the Development Director of Wellesbourne, University of Warwick. Martin's a town planner who is committed to economic growth whilst minimising the impact to the environment. So definitely a person after my own heart, because I have similar aspirations. So to introduce me, my name is Clare Wildfire. I'm Global Practice Lead for Cities at Mott MacDonald. And just a very quick introduction to Mott MacDonald for those of you who aren't that familiar. We design systems that keep cities running. So the roads and the railways, the schools, homes and hospitals, the energy, water, digital infrastructure, and also providing advice on underpinning issues like environmental, social and economic. Okay, so a bit of scene setting from me about technology, because technology innovation is bringing us so many new things. So drones, autonomous vehicles, robotics, wearable devices, and there are massive opportunities also unlocked by the Internet of Things, the collection analysis of data, issues like much better real-time feedback, artificial intelligence, virtual and augmented reality, and of course the ubiquitous digital twin, which we hope to touch on later. But it has been said many times before that sometimes it feels like the technology industry is creating solutions that are still looking for the problems that they can solve. And for a city or region, the important issue is that any sort of technological intervention must improve the lives of the citizen. So the value in technology will be measured on its outcome to society, and that's an important fact that we'll be delving into later. And another sort of element, another strand to this is that those who represent cities and regions, they're there for all the citizens, including those who are just keeping their heads above water. So when we do come up with winning solutions, it's important to be thinking who's actually winning. Is this everybody, the majority, or just a select few? Which is why in our conversation, we're going to focus on outcomes, and we're going to build up with three different parts of the value chain. So we're going to think about how technology will help us design and build places well, how it helps us run places efficiently, smoothly, and last but not least, how it will help our citizens and our cities be good, livable places. So starting with the first theme, which is design and build well, I'm going to ask Min Sung, where do you see technology delivering the most value in the design and construction of places? And maybe give some examples of where Nottingham Trent sees the biggest advances in this.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, I think in recent years, the most advances is certainly come from the increased wider use of digital tools by all disciplines and during all stages of the life cycle of a building, from design to on-site construction, to operation and even decommissioning. And for instance, during design stage, an architect can, based on the interpretation of client brief, using 3D design software to create a virtual building, specify the dimensions, the appearances, as well as the material and the building components and services systems, building services systems. And so effectively it's a virtual building and use it to communicate more effectively with the client and evaluate against the client requirement. And at the same time, engineers and specialist consultants can also evaluate the design against multiple aspects, like structural safety, energy consumption, accessibility, buildability, or compliance with building regulations. So all this enables the design team to identify potential defects and rectify them with minimum cost. And this will ensure the building can be built right first time and avoid the need for rework or remedial work. And with this kind of use of virtual buildings or digital models, or sometimes also known as a building information model, and the whole project team can have a shared building information repository. And so that this will ensure the whole team will always use the same and the latest version of a building description and specification. And this helps to avoid a lot of the communication problems. And this building model can be passed down from the design phase to the on-site phase, and each phase obviously add on to the model. And eventually, when the building finishes, and pass on to the client. So the clients can use it as a basis to organize maintenance and renovations, and eventually for decommissioning. So I think the wide use of digital tools certainly improved both the efficiency of the existing work, and also it allows the team do a lot more, not just kind of do what they're doing more efficiently, and do a lot more, open up a lot more possibilities.
Thank you. So effectively, it becomes a single source of truth that gets passed down between the different design team into the client for sort of onward use. And then, yes. So building on that thought, Martin, does that do you feel that means we'll need to see different behaviours in sort of procurement activity and the clients themselves in being able to make use of this the digital model?
So as when we were talking previously, if you look at the implications of technology on the car industry, you will see that if you stood in a factory 100 years ago and you stand in a factory now, you will see the fundamental difference there is in the manufacturing of cars. If you do the same on a building site, you'd be pretty pushed to tell the difference between what it looked like 100 years ago and what it looks like now. I think that's exactly the same in terms of how we engage people, in terms of asking them what they think of development. We still essentially show them a two-dimensional drawing on a piece of paper these days, or a screen, rather than a piece of linen. And I think, given that development is becoming more and more challenging to engage the public with, many of the comments that have just been made are so important to not only so the client can understand what is being built and amend it, but so can the public. And I think what we also need to be able to do is, when we engage with the public, we need to use technology so we can engage in a series of different formats. That means we get as wide a spread of comment as we possibly can. So if we have all done those dreaded shops in the middle of a shopping centre where we've stuck a load of plans on the side of the screen and then been surprised that we've only had a very limited type of person come through the door. Well, there's absolutely no reason to do that anymore with the way technology is. And we need to make sure that we are actually engaging with those people that may be using the facility. So this could be 1, 2, 6 years away before something gets built. And yet our method of engagement at the moment tends to engage with those that are of a fuller year, so to speak, as opposed to the ones that will be spending their hard-earned cash as they've come through school, college, university, and then become part of that. So I think how IT and how these technologies interface with development is absolutely critical to making the public understand what is coming, and perhaps making them slightly less concerned about the nature of the development. They can understand it better.
Makes it a lot more accessible, and also you can reach out rather than expecting just people to come to you. So it improves the transparency and trust, I think, and the visibility. Absolutely. Like you say. So then moving quickly on to a slightly different thread. So Rob, in terms of what's actually happening in construction in reality, so some of this is theoretical benefits. Where do you see, or where does Bruntwood expect to see what delivery approaches and value derived from stuff on the ground in construction or retrofit?
Good question. I guess if I kind of reflect back over my own experience, 20 odd years in the industry, the last 5 years been significant in terms of change of pace. There's so much change now takes place within our industry, and we have to adapt so much faster to that change. Actually makes the environment in which you work that bit more exciting. But you do have a tangible feel that you're able to adapt your plans, your thinking, to deal with many of the challenges that are ahead of us. And I know that's it's a heart of much of what Bruntwood are thinking about, and certainly our investments recently in the city around Innovation Birmingham and the Birmingham Life Sciences campus, thinking very much about how do we work with our partners to deliver something that ultimately, as the point you made, will make a difference. We all know we're facing a climate change emergency, and we all have in our industry have a collective responsibility to help deal with that. And I know that's extremely important to us at Bruntwood. So using technology to help drive down carbon footprints, both in terms of in the way we build, but also how buildings operate. We know that there's a lot of change coming forward. So thinking about building in resilience, about building in flexibility is really important. So we're on. We just recently achieved planning permission for Enterprise Wharf, which will be the new building we're delivering at IB. That will be the most connected building in the whole of the UK. So what that means is that there will be an open protocol with lots of digital connectivity right through the building, which will then be able to support all kinds of technologies as they start to evolve. And we're not we're not dictating what those technologies are going to be, because fundamentally we don't know yet. We just know they're coming, and a lot of them will be very, very useful. And then some of the kind of conversations we're having with organisations that 5 years ago you would never have considered. So we've got a conversation. I can't name the business at the moment, but we're talking to an organisation that's looking at putting infrastructure will connect our regional cities with vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, which will compete with trains. And they'll have ports basically in all our major cities. So you'll be able to effectively fly from one major city on battery technology, by the way, and connect. That technology is there. It's being developed. It works. It's been tested, and it will be coming. So all of these challenges, but all these opportunities, very, very exciting, and will fundamentally deliver much of the change that we need and we want. And I believe, and a very good point you made, Claire, about this has to be technology that benefits us all, and I believe it will.
Thank you. And I suppose what you're describing there is the need for designers to be able to understand what might come out in the future and build in resilience as they can. But a lot of this is sort of known unknown, and it's a least regrets approach, I suppose, to future change. So just moving on to our next topic, which is running places well, and a significant sort of component of known unknown is 5G, where when Lesley, we were talking before about the fact that there's massive transformation potential of 5G, but sometimes even we discussed it's difficult to comprehend those changes that might be coming. So can you give some examples of where West Midlands 5G are beginning to see the use cases that will come out that will provide these sort of useful outcomes?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'll just touch on, it's interesting that Ming mentioned about the use, the wider use of digital tools, and Rob talked about the most connected building. And I'd hesitate to suggest that actually 5G is fundamental in actually getting the full potential of digital connectivity, and the full potential in terms of efficiencies. But I think the exciting thing is that actually really spurring on some of these innovations that Rob alluded to, is us remotely going from one town to the next. But to your question, I think devices, connectivity, data, and the ability to transform our cities, whether that's the private sector or public sector, is actually a massive remit. And how do we look at that as an entry point? And I think for West Midlands 5G, we've looked at we've looked at lots of areas, but two I'll reflect on now is transport and health actually impacts the whole community. And those are two areas that we are looking at now. Transport, I can't remember now, I think it was a couple of years ago, there were some reports suggesting that congestion was costing the UK economy about 8 billion. And Birmingham was rated as the second worst city for congestion. So it's certainly, an issue that we need to look at. And okay, I know we are in the midst of a pandemic, but again, traffic levels are actually reported to be back to pre-pandemic levels. So yeah, we've got a task to do. So looking at transport, we need intelligent transport systems. Looking at efficiencies, but it's actually for people's lives. It makes people economically mobile. It makes places where we live attractive. It makes people want to live, grow, invest. So inward investment for the region, and getting our transport structure right. We've got quite a lot of work going on, but I'll give you two examples of which I think are quite important. One is a trial and a proof point that we've got for parking. Now, again, another little fact is apparently in cities like Birmingham, it takes on average 6 minutes to find a parking space. So that's the inconvenience, but actually it has a knock-on effect in terms of congestion and actually, very importantly, the environment and emissions. So we trialled a 5G real-time app that found parking spaces. So it's a proof point, it works, and it's something that we're looking at in terms of actually how can we use it for predictive parking. So that's just one example of something that's happened. Another one, relevant more to public transport, is a trial we did on trams in the region, a 5G connected camera on a tram. This is relevant. I talked about the traffic levels coming up. I think we can all agree that probably there's a resistance in terms of getting people back onto public transport. So giving that confidence in things that we do is important. So we, again, looked at a 5G camera on a tram for passenger management, but really pivoted now to actually look at social distancing. So it's interesting how a capability, once proven, has other options. And that's, like I said, I could talk, in fact, actually next year I could talk a lot more, because we've just launched 7 transport projects in September. So they're just kicking off, making inroads, but like I say, next year there will be other trials that we'll have more proof points for.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to ask another couple of questions here and then move on to audience Q&A. So I'm just toying with which question I'm going to ask next. I think, just as a warning, I want to talk about the pandemic and where we see technology can help in terms of rebuilding confidence. But before I do, just moving on to Martin, with your background in the public sector, is there where do you see the investment angle in here and the role for public-private partnerships in sort of fast tracking the take up of technology?
I think it's a really critical point, because when you are looking at encouragement of people taking decisions that will be inevitably risky, the ability to link with the public sector is absolutely critical. And I think the other thing that we sometimes forget about how the two sectors work together better is the nature of the funding that is going to come down to fund these entities is not going to be in a traditional way. It will be a mix of funding that comes down that will be either some private sector money and some public sector money. And I think by the public and the private working together, we can have a huge advantage with regards to state aid and issues like that. And the example I'd give you is that I was fortunate enough to lead the bidding process on UK BIC, which is the industrialisation centre for batteries that we were successful in winning a national competition for about 2 years ago now. And the consortium that did that was Coventry and Warwickshire LEP, Coventry City Council, University of Warwick and WMG. And then we had Jaguar Land Rover and a number of other private sector companies involved. And we were able, by doing it in such a cooperative way, we were able to not only cover all the angles that were required, but also, as the money was laid down to us by government, actually spend it in a way that it was so much easier not to get tangled up in things like state aid issues. So the benefits of public-private sector cooperation across these areas is so much wider than just saying, here's a site that's available, why don't you build what you want and we'll help you through the process. I think it's really critical that even when we get into the bidding process, we realise that we're stronger if both the parties work together.
And their business models are aligned because you've prepared the ground in advance for something that is sort of towards the greater good, I suppose, in some respects.
And the other thing I'd say to you is the benefits from both parties are different. So both parties can actually take a different viewpoint. So I just an easy one in terms of business rates. So sometimes local authorities can make a decision to be very cooperative at the front end in terms of values, knowing full well that they'll gain it back through a business rate line that could go on for a number of years. So the two entities, not only can they work together in terms of the physical, but actually they can work together in terms of the financial, so they can get a package that's acceptable by just having a cooperation between when people get their benefits from it.
And understanding what good looks like from the other side of the fence, I suppose.
What can get through the process from the other side of the fence?
Yeah. Right, let's come on to the rebuilding confidence pandemic question. So I'm just going to throw this out. So I suppose put your hands up if you've got something to say. But where do you see that technology can help us get back on our feet and from the sort of just transition, building green economy, all sorts of areas there. So Lesley, you got in there first.
Yeah. Well, no, I have. Sorry, I'm barging in, but I just think I'm really super excited about another trial that we're doing that I think is timely and I think will have a tremendous impact. The health sector, regardless of our current situation, has been under pressure. And actually, at the end of the day, what we want is better patient care. But marrying up the pressures and marrying up the demand is really hard. So looking at COVID and looking at the current pandemic, we are in the midst of a trial actually, looking at GPs, in 4 care homes, GPs connecting virtual ward rounds in a care home with residents. Now these are not just a GP on a camera, with a resident. It's actually diagnostic testing. So they're able to do real, as if they were at the care home or the patient was with them, real-time diagnostics. So that is enables an efficiencies, particularly relevant, in terms of COVID, in terms of making sure that not spreading and going into the place. But I think it's that remoteness and some of these tools that they're looking at have been available before, but they've not been used because of the 5G component in terms of real-time data and actually volume of data they need to get across to analyse. So that's one example in 4 care homes actually in our region now, which we're hoping to roll out to quite largely over the next year. So that, I mean, I know if I can just give another example, because I think this community self-administration. Yeah, sorry, it's just that I think self-administration in the community is actually what patients need and actually also delivers efficiency. So we've got several examples of work that we're doing, real world trials kind of happening now.
Thank you. Ming.
Yes, I think before we look at the after the pandemic, I think just let's reflect on just during the pandemic, technology played a crucial and essential role in deliver a lot of services, a lot of the existing business services, and from a university point of view, and obviously we adopted what we call a blended approach delivering teaching with a mixture of face-to-face teaching, and also a big proportion is online teaching. And of course, all the kind of a lot of the meetings are moved online with online system, just like today's events. And without technology, obviously, these events would not be able to happen. So I think that's certainly true, and I said in many other sectors as well. I can see after the pandemic, and that trend will just continue to grow.
Thank you. Yeah, Rob.
Can I just add that? I mean, I was actually going to pick up the same point that Ming's put there. If it wasn't for technology, we're in a very different place right now.
Yeah.
But as we think about the challenges ahead, this is not a case of technology for technology's sake. This is about technology driving the change that we all want to see happen. So we need to think about, what are the outcomes we want? What do we want our cities to look like, feel like, deliver for our people? And technology will be playing a significant part in that. And as I said, goes back to my point before, it is really exciting times, kind of that marrying up of technology to provide the solutions to the very challenging problems we're going to have as we move forward. But the answers seem to be there, and I think that has to be encouraging.
Thank you. I've got a question from the floor that I suppose opens up this question a bit, which is, thank you, really interesting discussion so far. What are the key emerging technologies for the Midlands economy over the next 5 years? So I suppose that there's an obvious one that Lesley can mention in 5G, but any other sort of burning issues that we can see before we come on to Lesley?
Yeah, can I just pick up one point? I think one of the things that is absolutely key for us going forward is around batteries. We are beginning to really lead the way in research around automotive batteries, but then batteries that roll out from there. So you think about within the West Midlands, we have Lotus Engineering's battery research. We have UK BIC, which is the European Centre for Battery Research. We have MIRA. We have a number of, we have a huge expertise in that sector. And I think it's absolutely key to the way the Midlands develops in terms of just it's reliant upon the automotive sector, but also how the whole life batteries will be rolled out into the rest of the community, that we continue to build on what we have, the great expertise we already have within the Midlands for certainly the West Midlands for this type of technology. And I think that is going to be as key as anything moving forward.
Yeah, good point. That's the really exciting future.
Yeah, sorry, Claire. I was just going to say, I think also from our perspective, we can look at solutions, but actually what really is important is marrying them up with the demand. So that is something that we've been looking at. We've set up innovation hubs across the region in our 3 main cities that are looking for marrying that demand side, those people that have got issues and challenges with the supply side, whether that's the SMEs or medium-sized companies that are developing solutions, actually what we're doing is actually creating something that is actually viable going forward, because there's that real demand and need for it. So I would suggest that anyone that has got any glimmer of an idea that they want to understand 5G a bit more and how it can impact, then these centres spring, like I say, across the region, are open to all, and it doesn't matter what size, doesn't matter if it's private or public sector. Come there to understand the solution, but also come there to talk about your issue. You've touched on, I think, green innovation, and that's going to be the big challenge that we're looking at in January at our Birmingham centre.
Thank you. So one more question from the floor, and then that's probably it. And it comes back to 5G again, which is, how do we make technology, particularly 5G, available to all? Is there a large part of otherwise there may be a large part of the community that may not get the benefits? So that's the sort of local levelling up and just the fairness angle.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and that's one of our remits. So I've been talking about use cases because they're super exciting, but our first remit is actually to accelerate the rollout of 5G in the West Midlands. And we have helped, and with others, that the region is actually the most connected region in the UK, and actually we are ahead of London, so that's really a big positive. In reality, there's lots more to do, and so we've got more to make sure that like I say, it's easy to roll out 5G in the urban areas where there's the demand, but there's still pockets of, where we haven't even got 4G or broadband. So part of our remit is to help that acceleration, so that actually we continue to be the most connected region.
Excellent, thank you. So we've got about 2 minutes. I'm just going to do a very quick wrap up, and then depending on how long that takes, anyone who's sort of got any final burning points, wave at me. So to recap, what we have discussed is how technology has to work for all and improve standards of living and lifestyles and things, and also be able to use it to decouple economic growth from use of resources. Ming said something when we were chatting in advance about 5G, which I would really like to replay back to you, which is that 4G changed lives, 5G will change society. And that definitely is something to think about. But then the point Martin made about some more, the sort of less on the digital, but more on the physical technology, is the Midlands and batteries as a sort of enabler of industry and economic growth there. So I think that's pretty much it. And I would like to thank everybody, including being succinct, so we finished on time because we're awesome. So thank you to Ming, Rob, Martin and Lesley. Anyone got any final quick snippet for our last 30 seconds? If not, let's just wave at everyone.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.